How
what
would
they're
you
really aiming for.
evaluate on this season 9 team? How would you evaluate Froggen's playing this year?
The season of 2019?
Yes.
Yeah. I thought Froggen did pretty well, to be honest. In spring, the time where I got to work with him daily, I think it's kind of hard in NA, at least, I believe, to kind of build a team around Froggen. I do think he'd work really, really well in just a European team, but I know he really wants to be in the US. But I thought he did good. A lot of the weird picks and stuff that he was pushing and playing as a team, I think that was a big part of why we were actually able to win the games that we did. Like, no one really knew what the fuck to do versus like Karthus mid, you know? Like, I think everyone else had a very stable pull of these 3 champions, and he was playing like Karthus, Vel'Koz, Lux, and no one else was touching that stuff. And he did pretty good. The team didn't necessarily like all get along very well with it, and that wasn't necessarily like Froggen's fault, but I know like certain players didn't necessarily get along with him too well. And ultimately, I thought like he did pretty fucking well with it. He was one of the people we were considering building around towards the end of the year. It was kind of between him and Hanser of who we would actually like stick with after the year.
Right, the classic critique of Froggen that everyone always gives is like, oh, does he roam enough, or is he just only trying to CS and go to a team fight? And does he even play the champions that allow you to roam? Like, obviously, if we think of this type of era, I'm having to cast my mind back a bit. It was like Aurelia, Akali, you know, maybe even Aatrox, you could maybe like force. Obviously, he wasn't generally playing. I know he played a couple of games of Aurelia, played like some Talon the odd game, but obviously these aren't classically his champions. What would you say to that? Because that's the thing that people are going to critique, because if they look at the highest level mid laners, the perception is you also like spread your lead around and you try and gank the other lanes, etc. What would you say to that?
Yeah. I mean, honestly, like I see him pretty similar to PoE. Like he's not really big on those pool of champions. Like you're never going to go in and expect like Froggen's going to play Aurelia this game or something like that, you know? But he still did have like those picks. Like right now in the meta is Lucian. Like he was a huge Lucian player. He loved playing it, and he would do a lot with that pick to try and help the team in jungle and try to advance that lead. And it just wasn't something we ended up like playing on that team at all. But I think he could easily fit off of it. It's just kind of it's kind of hard to find 4 people in NA to fit it, in my opinion. But I don't really stick on too much of the fact that he just kind of sits in his lane and does nothing the whole game. He definitely does try to help his team. He just has a different idea of how to approach to help people out than a lot of people here really play around or are willing to play around.
Since, as you mentioned, obviously he did like innovate some of those picks, or at least he was the only person in NA playing a whole bunch of them, right? When it comes to his champion picks, does he get basically the majority of the say in it? I mean, it does look like he always looks like he's pretty comfortable in the game with whatever he's picked. Is he someone where, like, as a coach, can you sort of like push him in the direction or something? Like, can you ask, can you play this for our comp? How sort of negotiable is it?
I think Froggen's definitely one of the players that got more of the leeway to just kind of pick what he thought was good for the comp. We pretty heavily prioritized him counterpicking, which would go down to those weird picks of like, I don't have experience personally working with players that were playing those picks, so I don't really know what other people are thinking of the matchups until he's kind of told me. But usually would have like a rough idea of like, oh, he kind of expects this pick in the situation is to be something good. And you just kind of confirm that with him and he'll like give it his go ahead of what he thinks is the best thing to pick. But usually you go in and you kind of have a rough idea of what the enemy team's going to pick anyways, and it's already like pre-planned by the time the draft happens.